Welcome to a video guide on how to beat Heatran. This is a translation of a guide from the Chinese community. A link to their videos on Bilibili is in the written version of this guide. Special thank you to Secret GG for helping with translation, and thank you to JudgeGuns, Developer, and Secret for helping with testing. A very quick overview of the strategy. It revolves around using Dig on the roar turn to reduce variance, making it very resilient and a consistent strategy. Magma Pool is removed on turn 1. Hydreigon and Flygon are used to do damage cap with ground damage, causing ground to be resisted by the adaptive shield later in the fight. We then have 3 Garchomps or other Dig users use Dig on the roar turn so that they are underground and immune to the roar, while one specific bulky Hydreigon that lived from the turn before damages the boss, pushing it over the roar threshold and causing the roar to happen. We have that Hydreigon user with a variety of mons so that it gets roared out into something. We don't mind which it is. And then finally, we finish out the fight with Gallade's Clicking Sacred Sword and rain boosted brines from AV Kingdra. If anything does go wrong, that Gallade can be used in a number of places to flex and causes the strategy to be very consistent. We'll do a quick overview of the mechanics. There is weather in the fight. It is not permanent. It is set by Torkoal as the first ad and a guaranteed third ad if you are to kill an ad. I don't recommend doing that. It also sets Sun via Magma Storm. First, if there's weather set and it uses Magma Storm, it will remove the weather effect. And then if there is no weather effect, it will set Sun. So it takes 2 Magma Storms to set Sun. Most strategies try not to have it bait any Magma Storms. We are using Kingdra to make sure that no Magma Storms get clicked. It has the ability Flash Fire, so it does not take damage from fire type moves. It has the held item leftovers, which needs to be knocked or theft. We will be using knock. And then the guaranteed moves at 100%, it sets a magma pool, which is a hazard that causes damage, and it causes quite a bit of damage. We'll be using 2 defogs to remove it. It takes 2 to remove it, not just 1. At 80%, it sets Stealth Rock, and this is a special Stealth Rock. It does damage on entry and then also at the end of turns. It may also be the beginning and end of turns. I forget. Doesn't matter that much. Then at 67%, there is a roar that happens. This is where most strategies fall apart. RNG, if you're using rain later, can really mess things up. If you get roared into all of your rain setters immediately, it can cause problems, especially if you need a fake Tears Pokemon to come out to deal with the barrier later. Iron Defense happens at 50%. Which makes it very hard to do physical damage. That's where we're relying on rain. The adaptation happens at 40%. We are doing ground damage early in order to bait that adaptation to be against ground so that we can use fighting and water types later. Other strategies try to bait fighting at first. I think that this strategy ends up being much more consistent than those, so we're going with ground here. And then at 25%, the protective barrier happens where you need to boost your attacks in order to break it. We'll be using Fake Tears. Usually the turn that Fake Tears is used, the barrier will proc, and then the following turn it will break. But as long as it's -2, it will be taking full damage from all of the attacks. In this case, we're using Brine or Weather Ball. Here's a quick composition cheat sheet. We're just going to go over it really quickly. We have 2 Flygons in the P1 and P2 slot, a light screen Pokemon, a knockoff Pokemon for P3 and P4. Then all players have Hydreigons, though there are 3 different EV spreads. This is to manipulate the AI into killing 3 of them in particular on the 3rd turn, I believe. We'll go over that in a second. 3 of the 4 players need a Garchomp, while the player that has the bulkiest Hydreigon does not, because that Hydreigon will be used to push the boss into the roar threshold over 67%. Then all 4 players have Gallade. All 4 players will have a Kingdra, and then the rest are weather setters. We have a Pelipper here, Politoed, and a Pelipper. To go over the composition a bit more specifically, starting off with the Flygons, they will be ground gems, so they can click Defog. Then they have to live a turn to click either Earth Power or Earthquake. If you have a physical Flygon already made, you can use that. Otherwise, a special Flygon might be a bit better with Earth Power. For the IVs, in the strategy, they used 5x31. There is a chance that you could get away with something that is something like 29 in HP and special defense, though you really do need to live that second turn just to make sure that the strategy is consistent. So I'd recommend it be very bulky as close to perfect as you can get. You max either attack or special attack, depending on whether you are physical or special. 156 into special defense, and then 72 into speed. For the screen setter, they used a light clay Sableye. It had 31 HP and 31 special defense, and then its actual raw stats came out to be 241, 182, I believe, something along those lines. Essentially, Sableye needs to live 2 turns, or it needs to survive 2 moves from the boss. So it takes 2 actions from the boss to make sure that the Flygons live on the same turn. So we used a Raikou with 6 HP and 31 special defense as its invest stats. That's an option. This is a flexible slot. If you can find something that lives two moves from the boss, that works perfectly. It just can't live an extra turn, and it can't die in 1 hit. That's the main concern. The knockoff user, I used a Krook. You'll see shortly. They used a Blaziken. It does not really matter. It can use Focus Sash to guarantee that it lives 2 attacks. So between the screen setter and the knockoff user, they both need to survive 2 attacks exactly. Rest does not really matter at all. This is a very flexible slot. Can be as bad or as good as you want it to be. Onto the Hydreigons. The P1 slot Hydreigon is the easiest one to breed if you want to make it. It is 2 times 31 special attack and speed, and it's better to be weaker. So lower stats, lower HP, lower special defense. This is to bait the boss to ensure that it goes after that Hydreigon and kills it hopefully in 1 move. The P2 Hydreigon is the one that is bulkiest. This is the one that's going to live into the turn where roar occurs. It's going to push into roar. It needs to be bulky so that the boss chooses to go after the P3 and P4 Hydreigon. So you see, we're all modest here, all earth power, all levitate. That's the only option for Hydreigon with choice specs. Essentially, the bulkiest will have 168 special defense, 88 speed, and then the slightly bulky ones will be 120 special defense, 138 speed. These are all 5 times 31 based on those stats. Again, you do really need to be pretty close to perfect here. I believe all of ours were perfect. So the only thing that I could really recommend here is going as close to perfect as possible. Hydreigon is such a useful Pokemon to have at 5 times 31. It's going to get a lot of use. I imagine it's just got incredible typing, base stats. It's used in Halloween. Just make a good one is what I would say there. For the dig Pokemon, but we want to give it Life Orb. I used Garchomp. We also use Excadrill. I believe Mamoswine will also work. There are options for this one. So if you don't have the Garchomp and you have something else OT, there are flexible versions for this. I do have Earthquake as a recommended move. Sometimes the Garchomps would live, and then you don't want to have to click dig again. That really messes up the cadence of the fight because you'll be living an extra turn, and then that messes up when you have rain and other things. So that's why this has Life Orb. Stats do not matter. It might be better to be weaker to be consistent, just so that you faint in 1 hit. Same thing for Gallades. Gallades can be weaker. This is probably one of the ones that I recommend being OT. Sharpness, obviously, Life Orb, 31 attack, 31 speed, adamant. You could also get away with the weaker natures, obviously, in Lonely and Naughty. And it's clicking Sacred Sword. The reason that Gallade is used in this slot is because Sacred Sword ignores the boss's Iron Defense. This is important. If the Garchomp lives, let's say, and it's clicking Earthquake, it will do much less damage because it's clicking Earthquake into that Iron Defense and potentially the Adaptation Shield later. Actually, no, that can't happen. Never mind. Then the Kingdra is pretty straightforward, also 5 times 31. This I think is a bit more flexible. I would recommend going at a bare minimum 25 HP, 25 special defense. I think mine is like 28. We are using Swift Swim to outspeed the boss. We virtually have rain guaranteed the entire time, so that allows us to outspeed. You will go full special attack, full special defense, and you're only clicking Brine. Kingdra will only come out after the boss is below 50% HP. So it will do damage cap. Then we have our rain setters. The player in the P2 slot will have 2 rain setters in Politoed and Pelipper. Then the other 2 rain setters can bring either Pelipper or Politoed. Doesn't really matter. If you already have a Politoed from other strategies because it outspeeds the boss with Timid, that's fine. You'll just click Weather Ball. or you can bring a Scarf Pelipper to click Brine. I don't have it here. I'm going to change this, but you may also want to put Water Sport on your Pelipers and Politoads. One of the ways to adapt the strategy in case you use a Gallade somewhere is to click Water Sport with one of the rain setters early, just to make sure that there are less magma storms overall. If you were to breed any of these OT, I would recommend the Kingdra because every player needs one of those, the Gallade because every player needs one of those, a Pelipper because almost every player needs one of those, and probably a Hydreigon. You could also do your Digger as well. It's kind of up in the air between Gallade, Kingdra, and Pelipper. And Hydreigon, you're pretty much guaranteed to have 4 OT of the set, though it gets a little weird with EVs and all that, but we'll get into that. And then finally, the Fake Tears user, which wasn't on that initial paste, needs to be, I think the only options are Infernape and Jolteon. They need to outspeed Kingdra. In the very rare case that the Hydreigon user that has the Fake Tears user needs to use their Gallade because the Hydreigon faints early, the Kingdra needs to come out, or the Fake Tears user needs to come out on turn 8, and it needs to go before everything else. Otherwise, the speed doesn't matter, but it does matter in that rare case. So a max IV EV, Choice Scarf Infernape or Jolteon should outspeed the un-EV'd Kingdra in rain. I think that is 412. Double check on that. But yeah, Choice Scarf can go in this slot and basically guaranteed that Fake Tears will go off first, just to ensure that in the rare instance that the Hydreigon faints for that user. Here is a quick turn-by-turn cheat sheet that you can either pause the video on if you need to reference quickly or go into the written guide. I'll just go over it quickly so there's some runtime for this. So there's a timestamp so you can click on it. You can also just skip this if you want to go directly to the fight, and I'll just describe this in more detail. Essentially, we have the Flygons going first, clicking both defogs, removing the Magma Storm. We have Light Screen go off, Knockoff go off. Light Screen and Knockoff users will faint. Those players will bring in their Hydreigons, and the Flygons should survive the next turn, though if they do not, it's not the end of the world. The Gallade can go there, and then they just bump up what rain Pokemon they use in those slots where they would start using Gallades. The Hydreigons will live to the next turn. The Flygons should faint this turn. Then we have all Hydreigons that next turn, and the ideal scenario, which the EVs should induce, is the weakest Hydreigon in the P1 slot will faint. The P2 slot Hydreigon is the bulkiest, and that should live to the next turn. And then the 2 Hydreigons that were in on turn 2 that have survived to turn 3 will faint this turn. So we have 1 Hydreigon living to turn 4. We have everyone else bringing in their dig users. That Hydreigon clicks Earth Power. All of the dig users do need to be faster than that Hydreigon, so that is something to keep in mind. That's the reason that you go 252 in attack and speed and whatever dig user you bring. Then you will be roared into, this player 2 will be roared into one of, that'll be either their Gallade, one of their rain setters in Politoed or Pelipper, or Kingdra. It doesn't really matter which one. It's probably best if it's just one of the rain setters, though there's enough resilience in the strategy that doesn't quite really matter. The following turn, once everything faints, or if a Garchomp lives, it'll be clicking Earthquake on turn 6. Otherwise, it's all Gallades on turn 6 just to do a round of Sacred Sword damage. This is just a very consistent way of doing 4%. And then the rain phase, if you'll call it that, begins. It's Kingdras from there on out. You'll just set weather. That's the player 2 slot with the bulky Hydreigon potentially has 2 weather setters. They'll go first. Then the Fake Tears has to happen on that turn. The Fake Tears user needs to be either a Jolteon or Infernape, or there's a couple other fast electric type users. You want to be fire or electric to bait an Earth Power and not a Magma Storm. And then 2 Kingdras will come out. The Kingdras will usually live a turn, almost always live a turn, so that's 2 brines from each Kingdra. The following turn will also break the adaptive shield. The Fake Tears last the turns that it's used and the following turn before the boss shrugs it off. So you're just clicking brines with the Pelipers and Kingdras, and the rest of the fight is just pretty straightforward. You'll have more than enough damage to defeat the boss. you'll actually see I trolled. I forgot Sacred Sword on my Gallade, and we didn't need it. Psycho Cut did a massive 1% damage, and we still had plenty of damage left over. Now we'll take a look at the battle itself. We're on 2x speed here to see the turn 1. Magma Pool goes down when we start. The Torkoal will always be on the left, and we reset for Magmortar on the right. So as described earlier, this is where the 2 defogs happen to remove the Magma Pools. We have Raikou clicking Light Screen with that Light Clay to ensure that we have Light Screen for the entirety of the battle. That's not true. It falls off on turn 9, but you should be defeating the boss before it can hit you. So that's why we need 8 turns of Light Screen. Raikou, like I said, takes 2 attacks there. The Crocodile takes 2, and then it actually takes 1 for the Magmortar. So that's the 2 attacks that it will take. And then Heatran gets 1 off on the Flygon. If you do have a Flygon crit here, they did upload, they being the Chinese guide makers, uploaded a view of their kill where a Flygon fainted, and they just used their flexible Gallade in that slot here. So this is where the 2 Hydreigons come in. These are the slightly bulky ones. Everyone's clicking Earth Power or Earthquake here, and we're just doing all damage to the boss. This is the first true damage turn. The boss will begin doing damage and focusing the Flygons based on their EV spreads. So we have the first one there going down, the second one, and then I believe the other are 2 hits there from that Flygon. And then we'll get 1 hit on the Hydreigon. I think ideally the Hydreigons take no hits from Heatran, but they will take 1 here. That Magmortar will be doing damage on the right side of the field. We just mostly ignore that. It's the ideal add. Most strategies reset for that one. This is the turn where we have all Hydreigons. We actually have our bulky Hydreigon in the P1 slot, so this is going to be a little bit confusing. It's going to look weird, but those 2 sides you can interchange just because it's not like the Suicune fight where it mattered who was adjacent to who. But we're doing all Earth Power. Earth Power has a chance to low roll and not hit cap, but we have excess damage, so we don't mind that happening. So one of our medium bulky Hydreigons goes down, then our weakest Hydreigon goes down. Goes down there, and then the final Hydreigon goes down to that Magma Storm and faints. So we have our bulkiest Hydreigon left over, and all of our dig users will come in now. Ignore the lower left where I didn't realize that we had those swapped and thought that the fight was over. If one of those Hydreigons were to die early of the P3 and P4, that user's Gallade can go in that slot, and then they will just bring up either a Rain Setter, or if it's the Fake Tears user, their Kingdra. That's the most complicated flex position. Usually that won't happen, but essentially you'll have to Fake Tears on turn 8 rather than on turn 6, like the strategy would hope for, or turn 7. So the roar happens. We are all underground, so our dig users do need to be faster than whoever is clicking Earth Power there. We get roared into a Politoed here. We don't really care. That Politoed just gets focused, gets pretty annihilated. And then that bulky Hydreigon user will just bring the Hydreigon in for 1 more Earth Power click before the boss should faint it. So as I said, the dig users have somewhat, there's flexibility there. We have the Garchomps, or Garchomp singular here. In the Chinese video, they use all Garchomps, though they recommend basically anything that will hit damage cap with dig. Here are the digs happening now on turn 5. All 4% damage. And then the final Earth Power from the Hydreigon. So that's another 4 turns of damage cap hitting 4%. And it will finish off the rest of these. Like I said, there is a chance if you're using Garchomp that it lives. It happens on one of their videos that they uploaded. You'll just click Earthquake probably into the Iron Defense, unfortunately, and it will do minimal damage, but that's extra damage, as you know, their later turns are very flexible. And that's why it's important to also be Life Orb on the dig users. Gallade is our choice band user. And Gallade is used here because regardless of the boss's defense, Sacred Sword ignores the defense boosts. I don't know why the video is stuttering here. Having trouble recording on this laptop. Psycho Cut does not, in fact, ignore the boss's defense. So if you do click Psycho Cut, you're trolling your team. So make sure you remember to put Sacred Sword on your freshly OT Gallade. So my Gallade did 1% damage to the boss. You'll see here that that won't matter in the slightest. Just a testament to the brilliance of the strategy that the Chinese community has come up with. It's just extremely effective and does overkill damage with its consistency. I think it's extraordinarily clever that they use Dig to dodge the roars to improve the consistency of the strategy. And then you need to coordinate with your team a bit, make sure that everybody's clicking the right thing. We've got 1 Pelipper setting weather, 2 Kingdras, and our fake tears user in Jolteon. So Jolteon or Infernape are used. You can, I believe you need to I think it's better if you outspeed. I don't think it will matter though in terms of when the fake tears happens, because the following turn is where you'll probably break it anyway. So we get the brines off and then the protective shield goes up after all of the brines happen anyway. Probably doesn't make a difference, but faster is probably better, and having a fast fake tears user for future raids is probably very useful. The Kingdras are important. Something like a Suicune may not work because the Kingdras will bait that earth power. The dragon water resist is very useful. If you bait solar beams, it probably won't mess things up. Might be slightly better. I just recommend the Kingdras. They're easier to acquire. If you have the Suicune and you want to test it yourself, be my guest. Can't guarantee that it'll work, but just need that bulky AV user here. We didn't need the rain user, and our 2 rain, the 2 people with their remaining rain setters did not leave the field. Their Kingdra stayed on the field. So we were unable to set rain. The boss is at 8% now, and it's well within range of the final 4 Pokemon that remain, the 2 rain setters. So you can see that it's quite a bit of overkill on damage with the exact 6 Pokemon we have. This is a very quick 9-turn solution to beating Heatran. Really thrilled with the consistency of this one. Much better than the fighting spam to begin that we've seen as like the initial, this is a way to beat the boss. It was very inconsistent for me, so wouldn't really recommend that. I'll be using this from here on out. If you have the Pokemon for that strategy and you find other people that want to do that, where you're doing the Metacham Heracross lead with bulky waters, that can work. The main drawbacks are you run into a lot of inconsistencies with Roar. And we'll just review the kill that the Chinese community uploaded, where they had a Flygon faint to, I believe it's a crit. When you're viewing these videos, you have to do a bit of deciphering, unless you're fluent in Chinese, obviously, via animations and the sort. So they use a Raichu for their knockoff, I believe. I forget exactly. I think it has Focus Sash there. Regardless, it's removing the leftovers, obviously a requirement for the fight. We have the Solar Beam go off. The Flygon dies in 1 hit. So if you recall, the Flygon does need to live a second turn, though we will just be a bit flexible here. I'll skip ahead a bit. Flygon faints, showing battle log. Too far ahead. We have the Gallade in that slot where the Flygon would be. Don't need to log in, thank you very much. So basically, because that Flygon was not in that slot, you use the Gallade to do damage cap. It doesn't cause, the adaptation to change. Essentially, we're just clicking Sacred Sword, emulating what the Flygon would be doing here, which is doing damage cap and then fainting. So then the rest of the turns proceed as usual. We have all of the Hydreigons come in. You could do the same thing if, like I said before, the P3 or the P4 Hydreigon fainted on this turn. They could be doing the same thing with their Gallade and moving in here. If you have them all faint, if you have multiple fainting early, in a very rare case that you get uber unlucky with crits, if your name is Spidget or Smooge, for example, that probably could happen. It might be a forfeit, though I don't think they've seen it. I don't think we've seen it, so you should be okay. Everything else pretty much proceeds as normal. They use all Garchomps. They all click dig. Same things happen. Attacks are dodged because they're underground. The Hydreigons come back out. The digs go off. And then the fight plays out almost exactly the same, except for this final turn where it would be all Gallades. This is where they have a Garchomp live, and it'll click Earthquake into the boss to do minimal damage. The Rain Setter comes out for that, where that Gallade would be. We don't really mind that here. They elect to click Water Sport in this situation. I guess there's a consistency issue if the boss starts clicking Magma Storms. So Water Sport ends up being slightly better here. I think that you could probably do either Weather Ball or Water Sport. Not quite certain. Again, this is a rare case, and then it's an even rare case to be clicking Water Sport or Weather Ball here. So not super, super important, obviously. Essentially, once you get to this place, it's all Gallades, and then it's pretty much from there on out the same thing. You're either clicking your Kingdras or your Weather Setters, depending. There is one final caveat, though. If this does happen to your Fake Tears user, they'll have to go Kingdra first in order to get the boss into Fake Tears range, which does mess with the turn order. There is a guide on what that looks like in the written guide. And again, with everything that I do, the written guide will always be the most up to date. I can't update the videos once they've been uploaded. So always check the written guide for updates, comments as well. I'll be posting major updates there in the comments, usually via pins. So overall, I'm very thrilled with the consistency of this strategy. If anyone is familiar, I did post a guide on how to beat the Heatran raid. I warned that I didn't think it was very consistent, not really proven, and I figured that was still the case after 2 attempts of using it. Then testing this new strategy, it seems to be much more consistent. There are very few RNG issues. Even Mono Water had issues with baiting Magma Storms through Water Sport, through Rain, and this strategy seems to alleviate those RNG issues late. Baiting ground early, it makes it very consistent, especially with those EV spreads, ensuring that that cascading of Pokemon goes down perfectly into the final Earth Power user, pushing the boss into Roar while all of our users are underground. Just a very clever bit of gameplay. I never would have thought of that personally. I just think that this is overall a very clever, wonderful strategy. Special thank you to those users, again, to Secret, to Developer, and to Jedge Guns for helping testing. Could not have done it without them. And good luck with the breeding. Again, if you're still listening this long, it's probably a Kingdra, Gallade, Pelipper, Hydreigon angle for your OTs, though I would say like 5 would be good. Most of them anyway are useful to have as OTs for future raids regardless. So good luck with your Heatran raids. And I will probably see you all, who knows, soon. Later.